but you wouldn't pay for it,
Yeah,
right?
Tom knows I'm super into comics, but that is a movie I would have just waited for. I have it,
Mm.
actually I watched it at home, but just waited for it for the home release. Saw no
Right.
need from anything I saw in the trailers to go watch it in the theater.
Mm.
As opposed to,
So,
and that's because, and Wonder Woman's one of those movies where I was on the fence, but because of my past exposure to the Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, I was kind of leaning toward, well, just wait till it comes out. As
yeah,
opposed to, oh, I want to see it with everyone else in the movie theater.
yeah. So how would you rate Wonder Woman, Tom?
Mind blowing.
Great.
Great.
Wait, what's the scale again?
Mind blowing,
great?
amazing, great, good.
Okay. I think objectively as a movie, it's great. But I think for what it means for superhero movies and female superhero movies, it becomes amazing.
Yeah, well, for female superhero movies, it might even be mind blowing, right? If you're just looking at that slice. And for DC,
Right.
it's probably amazing because DC has had so many misses recently.
Yeah. I think it's an amazing. That's so hard. It's
I
not
know.
making it easier, Merritt.
Well, and my great was before I thought of the scale, and I was like, but wait a minute, what? So I love Gal Gadot. I think she kills it.
Yeah.
I love the mythology and how they handled the Amazon part. Obviously, the No Man's Land scene is great. But there are some parts of it where I'm like, well, this isn't necessarily an innovative storytelling in this part and this part. So that's why I'm like, oh, it's great. I didn't come out of it going, that was amazing. But I might have if I were a different person. So I don't know.
Well, it depends on how you qualify that movie. Do you qualify it based on entertainment? Do you qualify it more critically based on plot, character development, script?
Well, I think
the scale that we're
to
talking about is my emotional reaction,
Yeah,
not a
exactly.
critical reaction.
Exactly. I don't think you can dive into all of those elements, Roger, because if you do, then it's the scale doesn't really work anymore. It has to be how
the reason
you
why I
feel
bring
about
that up
We
is
have got to start the show because we have
Oh.
so much. And
Yes.
I can tell
All right,
we're
hiding.
getting too into this Wonder Woman conversation.
I'm hiding him.
All right. Sorry to play the heavy.
Sorry.
Here we go. Daily Tech News Show is powered by you. Thank you so much. If you actually aren't supporting the show yet, you can take care of that. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/support. This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, June 5th, 2017. I'm Tom Mara. We have got lots to deal with today, and thankfully, Patrick Beja is in on a Monday. Veronica had to move to Tuesday, and Patrick's going to be in here to talk about all the stuff out of Apple's WWDC announcement. How did you survive, Patrick?
Wait, I thought Apple? I thought it was Wonder Woman. What are we?
Oh, you just watched Wonder Woman again. I see. Well, that could be fun,
okay.
too.
I thought it was great. But the WWDC keynote, interestingly, was longer than that Wonder Woman movie.
Oh my God, you're so right.
It was kind of interesting as well. I actually was surprised that I enjoyed myself at a few parts of that keynote.
Yeah, I thought the Google announcement at I.O. was a breakneck pace, but Apple was pretty breakneck too, even though it was 2.5 hours long. It moved most of the time. There were fewer times than usual where I just felt like they were wasting time or taking too much time. They packed in the announcements. In fact, let's start with a quick summary of the things you should know about WWDC. Apple started by announcing Amazon Prime Video coming to Apple TV and integrating with the Apple TV app. That's happening later this year. They didn't give us a date. They then spent the next 2.5 hours talking about new features in iOS 11, including an augmented reality developer kit called ARKit, peer-to-peer payments, and an Apple Cash Card in iMessage, a redesigned App Store, as well as drag and drop and file system management for the iPad. There's also a new iPad, the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, starting at $649. MacBook Pros and iMacs got a spec refresh. They now have Kaby Lake processors inside. And a new iMac Pro is coming later this year with Xeon processors and Radeon Vega graphics. That should arrive in December for $4,999. And the pièce de résistance, the HomePod, is Apple's new smart speaker with Siri built in. That's coming in December for $349. Patrick and I are going to dive into more details on these announcements in a few moments. But if you had to summarize it in 5 words, Patrick, what would you say?
5 words. So many things to discuss.
That's absolutely right. All right, here are some more top stories. Former Oculus founder Palmer Luckey has a new startup working on surveillance technology for national borders and military bases and the like. The system uses LiDAR and infrared sensors to detect things, mostly humans, but also it could detect drones, unmanned aerial vehicles moving through restricted areas. Luckey claims the system would save taxpayer dollars while keeping troops and citizens safe.
I am so divided on my comments on Palmer Luckey that I think it's probably best that I don't comment too much.
Well, you got to separate the personal, right? Whatever you think of him in his personal opinions and whatnot, this is an interesting direction to go with a startup. It's not what I would have guessed from a guy who founded Oculus. Yeah.
And it seemed for a moment that after having left Facebook with everything we know, he might spend a lot of time spending his money in ways that not might be the most responsible ones, or at least that's the air that we sort of perceived around him. And apparently he is back to work fairly quickly after having left Facebook. So maybe we misjudged him a little.
Working on a serious project, right?
Yeah. Nikkei reports Amazon and Apple have joined Foxconn's bid to acquire Toshiba's NAND flash memory manufacturing business. Foxconn faces resistance as Japan's government would prefer a Japanese buyer. Foxconn also recently acquired Japan's Sharp Electronics.
So yeah, Amazon and Apple would like to have an in on a supplier of these parts. So that's why they're willing to throw in some cash. Foxconn needs to build up a lot more cash if they're going to be able to throw enough money at Japan to let them buy another Japanese company at this point. So they're pulling out all the stops.
And it's, the other aspect of this is concentration. It's getting kind of crazy how concentrated all of the mobile manufacturing business, well, not just mobile, but it's used mainly in mobile devices, we're seeing. I wonder, I don't know that industry enough, but I'm getting enough hints that I'm starting to wonder if that concentration isn't starting to become an issue, or might become an issue in the near future.
Well, Apple is notorious for locking up supply chains on low yield parts, and I can't imagine that anyone besides Amazon who's in on this deal is going to be pleased at them having even more leverage on something.
Yeah. And we've also heard that some of these lockups were causing issues to Nintendo for the manufacturing of the Nintendo Switch, for example.
Exactly. Good news for Moore's Law. IBM, Samsung, and Global Foundries announced the world's first 5-nanometer silicon chip process. It's the first chip to use horizontal gate-all-around transistors. You'll see them abbreviated as GAA. And if you're familiar with FinFET, which is what the current 12-nanometer processes use, this is GAA-FET or GAA-FET. They're using GAA-FET in combination with extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV, that can make the chips as small as 3 nanometers when you combine the two. So they've got a 5-nanometer chip. They think they can get it down to 3. 5 nanometers alone would offer a 40% performance boost if you keep power consumption the same, or you can go the other way and get a 75% drop in power consumption if you keep the performance the same. They can squeeze 30 billion transistors on a 50 square millimeter chip. That's up from 20 billion transistors on a 7-nanometer process. So this is good news for the ability to keep squeezing more transistors on chips.
But really, seriously, 2021, Moore's Law, for sure, this time we're certain it is going to end in 2021. I mean, this is incredible. Does it mean, Tom, please tell me, does it mean that we're finally, after this one, going to reach the limits of Moore's Law?
Who knows, right? They've been predicting the death of Moore's Law since the 80s. Right? There's because every time you say, well, with FinFET, FinFET hits a limit and you can't go past 5 nanometers. And then somebody's like, well, what about GAA-FET? And like, well, you can't make that practical. Well, IBM, Samsung, and Global Foundries just figured out a way to make it practical. So there's always somebody working on a new way. I feel, if you ask my gut feeling is that Moore's Law will be unnecessary before it dies. In other words, we will find a way where the number of transistors on a chip is no longer relevant to computing power before we reach the limit of people's ingenuity and how to get around it.
After attacks in London this weekend, UK Prime Minister Theresa May, we don't pronounce it the same way in French, and so I had a small block on her name, called for international agreements that regulate cyberspace to prevent the spread of extremist and terrorism planning. May has previously supported backdoors for domestic encryption, and Facebook Director of Policy Simon Milner said, "We do not allow groups or people that engage in terrorist activities or posts that express support for terrorism."
So this brings up the whole, backdoor in encryption debate again. We've covered that quite a bit on Daily Tech News Show. We really don't have time today to go into it again, but it seems as if the Prime Minister is saying she would like to revive that debate. And the short version of the debate is when you put a backdoor into encryption, especially regionally, like just in the United Kingdom, it means that the folks who you're trying to shut down will just go use other tools in other parts of the world because you can't stop math, and encryption is just math. And you've created a weakened product that could lead to a vulnerability for law-abiding citizens who would be forced under your law to use them.
It is surprising that given what we've seen about hacking in the past year or so, this is still a topic of conversation. And I'm sure there is some genuine concern. I mean, there is some genuine concern, but maybe some genuine intent on the part of the UK government. But it also feels like saying something just to be able to say something. And to appear,
that's possible.
To appear strong, but
Facebook, Google, Twitter, a lot of them have responded to this saying we are working hard to make it not a safe space for discussions, and I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I also don't want this to be a place where people can exchange information on how to blow me up or other people. But at the same time, if you drive them out of there, they will go find other places to discuss these things and to spread propaganda. So I think it's a more complex issue than just shutting them down on platforms. But this is maybe maybe this is just a political move which said, hey, we're going to revive that encryption debate unless you do more to crack down on posting.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, but it doesn't feel like that. And also, everyone I've seen has a very hard time connecting this specific attack to, anything that would be improved by backdoors of the type she's talking about. So, but again, as you said, it's a very complicated and long debate that we don't have time to dive into.
I'll tell you what, though, if you want to finish on a positive note, the One Love for Manchester concert was brilliant. I am still blown away, and I said this on Twitter, that the response to someone bombing a concert was to put on an even bigger and even better concert, and that's a good response, in my opinion.
I do think, regardless of on where you fall on these issues, and we're veering a little bit away from tech here, but I think everyone would agree we do have a lot of discussions about the dangers of terrorism and the negative aspects of it. And certainly it's hard to talk about positive things, but I do think that terrorism's main weapon is to breed fear. So one of the weapons we should use more than we currently are, and I think it's changing a little bit, is to, I know it's hard to say, but almost laugh in the face of that fear. And I think it can be effective. Of course, it has to be accompanied by a lot of police work, a lot of, actual.
Sure. It's not a simple issue, of course.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, live streamed on Twitter. I mean, when have you seen Twitter, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, like the BBC, like everybody just willingly sharing their live stream around? Yeah. That was pretty amazing. Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, subscribe to Daily Tech headlines.com. Or you can also get it as an Amazon Echo flash briefing or on the Anchor app. Go check out the Anchor app. It's got Annie Gauss and Scott Johnson and Jeff Kanata and myself all on there at anchor.fm. All right, my summary of the WWDC is Apple wanted to be sure you know it has a lot going on with machine learning. They were working it into every single announcement that they could make an argument to work it into. And it's committed to professional users. They were bending over backward to combat this perception that they don't care about high-end pro users. They talked about Final Cut Pro X. They talked about doing, high-end graphics work. There was pro thrown around all over. Before we get to talking about the HomePod, which I think is the first of the announcements we want to get into, do you have a high-level reaction like that?
Yeah, the machine learning, definitely. It's not a product or one thing that we can point to, but, I think, I'm not sure how, certainly it was intentional that they talked about it, but it does seem like it's just embedding itself in everything that everyone in the tech space is doing. So it's kind of reassuring for people who root for Apple to see that they are using that technique. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that they are artificially mentioning it more than they would otherwise. It's just that that's, the way things are done in many areas now.
Yeah, it's a matter of emphasis, if you will.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the HomePod. So speaking of emphasis, they were emphasizing music, which I thought was a very clever way to pitch the HomePod, because what they're identifying is, well, the Google Home has decent sound, but it doesn't always work great, and it's not perfect for that. And the Amazon Echo speaker, well, we all know that's a very bad speaker, and the audiophiles tend to pick on the Amazon Echo speaker. So they really leaned into that. They talked about 7-speaker array, beam-forming tweeters, 4-inch upward-facing woofers, the A8 chip that can do real-time acoustical modeling, and audio beam-forming, and multi-channel echo cancellation. So they were showing, like, we have this really good quality sound that is important to us, and we've got this intelligence with Siri in there that can pick the perfect music for you, and it can stream it throughout the house to different speakers if you want, and Apple TV can control it. Oh, and you can do news and stocks and sports and podcasts and stuff.
That is exactly how it felt. It's like all of those things that you're describing. I'm sure for a musicophile, it's going to sound really cool, but essentially it's like, yeah, it's a good speaker. We get it. Like, awesome. Great. And that, as I was saying earlier, it's not intentional. I think that they pushed in machine learning in their different product announcements. For this one, I'm certain they shaped the way they announced it very specifically to convey to the audience, we're not doing the same thing as the other ones. We're like, this is about music. And then towards the end, oh, and by the way, it's also a virtual assistant.
I mean, we're not going to limit it if you want to do this other stuff, exactly. Right? It is Siri after all. But a clever way to set expectations, though.
Absolutely. Definitely. But I don't think the main this is a way of getting Siri in your home, I think, in a way that maybe prepares it for the future, or that will, hopefully, if Siri manages, render the same services that the Amazon Echo or the Google Home does. So it's not like this is just a music thing and it's the other things on the side. It's really that product from Apple. So they're kind of trying to pull one over us and saying this is, yes, it is better at music, but it's a home assistant. It's not.
Well, right, exactly. Because they talked a lot about HomeKit and the fact that the HomePod acts as a HomeKit bridge, and you can control your HomeKit devices with your iPhone if you have a HomePod on the other end. So it is, in a sense, a hub for a smart home. But yeah. I get where if they position it as, hey, here's a smart speaker like Amazon Echo, people will say, well, I already have one of those. Or I already like the Google Home. I don't think Siri's that great compared to the other ones. So, if they position it as a smart home, then it sounds complicated to a lot of people. Like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for a whole smartphone home. I don't really have bulbs or any of those Ring things. But if you say, hey, everybody loves music, right? Buy this thing. Yeah. All you're trying to do is get it into people's homes, so then you can start showing them what else they can do with it.
Absolutely. And this is, Apple's super clever marketing at work. And not marketing in the sense that they're, lying about the product to you. It is apparently a really great speaker, and it is awesome to listen to music. And I'm certain that a lot of people are going to be very happy to have it in their home to listen to music. But it's still, showing you what they managed to do is, for most people, this is not going to sound like a Me Too product. And that was really hard.
That was the key, yeah. Because I guarantee there are going to be audiophiles criticizing this and showing why it's not as good of a speaker as Apple wants you to think it is compared to high-end speakers out there. But that's not going to matter to a lot of people either. All that's going to matter is that they're like, oh, music thing. Yeah, I like the musics. And this one objectively sounds better when I play the three side by side. So,
what do you think about the price?
$349, two colors, white or space gray, shipping in the US, UK, and Australia in December. Another clever bit of positioning where they mentioned a bunch of higher prices before they came out with $349.
Yeah, that was a little bit more transparent.
Yeah. No, this $349 is a fair price. I think it might be slightly on the high side, but it's not unreasonable. It's certainly not a bargain, though.
Yeah, no, it's not. But if one of them is enough to make to fill one of your rooms with high quality music, as they're implying, not the best music in the world, but high quality music, it seems like a decent investment to have music in your home. Because it is true, when you think about it, we don't have any devices anymore that can do, like, you can have a portable speaker, but there's not like the one product that you want. And for people in the Apple ecosystem, you can now have music in your home again. How did it ever work before that thing?
It was Sonos. It was Sonos before, but it wasn't voice activated. So I mean, that's kind of what they've done here. And Sonos is in the Amazon Voice Services system, and I would expect them to come out hard with it built in if they are going to come out with a voice activated Sonos, because that would be the biggest competition here. And then would Sonos disappear from Apple stores everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, Sonos is having cold sweats, I think, with this announcement. They knew it was coming, but no one thought that they would push the music thing as hard. So Sonos has been, I believe, mainly a product for Apple people who want a music solution. Maybe they're big on Android as well, but it seems all of my music loving Apple friends are, saying how awesome Sonos is or was. I think they're in trouble.
Let's go to iPad. We get the 10.5-inch display that had been rumored with the 40% smaller bezel. Not quite the same size as the 9.7-inch iPad, but pretty close, and still only a pound. They made a lot out of the 600 nits of brightness in HDR video and calling the 120 hertz refresh rate ProMotion instead of just saying it has double the refresh rate. But it is a solid tablet, and yet it is a tablet. This has got USB 3 fast charging. It's still Lightning. It's got the same camera as the iPhone 7. It's got an A10X Fusion processor, but it's going to cost you $649 for a 64 gig version, $749 for 128, and $949 for 512. They've got a much bigger version now. 10.5-inch model, the 12.9-inch model will cost you $799 or $899 or $1,099. And of course, there's LTE, which makes it even more expensive. Order today, shipping next week. So these things are here. What made it more relevant, because I think a lot of people, it wasn't a ton of clapping when they said, hey, it's a new iPad Pro. When they started talking about what iOS 11 will do on the iPad Pro, that's when it started to turn some heads, because now you can call the dock up no matter what app you're in. Now you can pull an app from the dock and put it in the side. Now you can drag and drop things like URLs and text and images. It's starting to act like a computer. And granted, every time they do something like this, I like to poke fun at the fact that, hey, all of these features that we had in 1989 are finally showing up on tablets. Well, now they're showing up in enough ways that it's starting to feel like a functional computer. And the biggest part of that was the files system. So nested folders, support for iCloud, Dropbox, OneDrive, and more. and the ability to just drag and drop things into files and see a file system. Not as robust as on your desktop by any stretch, but man, that has been something that has bugged me for a long time. I don't know about you.
I mean, yes, for sure. The thing is, it seems that with this update, they are a lot of things to say about this, but they are addressing one of the issues that we have on iPads when we try to do work. I don't want to even say serious work, but work. And that's getting stuff from one app to the other. Like getting stuff around is a nightmare on the iPad. You will need like 7 or 8 steps to copy something somewhere else, when on an actual desktop, it's a couple of clicks. So that is incredibly important, I think, to keep moving the iPad forward, and for it to start to be considered as a valid work tool. And beyond that, you're absolutely right. The iPad itself, the hardware is kind of, yeah, okay, it's a different iPad, but what really makes it shine is this iOS, and it's really surprising, at least it surprised me, that Apple is still going full steam ahead on the iPad. I think it would have been easy, at least that's what I did, to conclude that, well, you know, the iPad has its place, but it's kind of okay. It's not amazing. It's not doing amazing numbers-wise. It's doing well, and, you know, the iPad business is probably 3 times the business of any other big company. But still, it's not the iPhone. It's not the huge read category.
Well, and it's not growing. I mean, the biggest part of it is it's not a growth area right now.
But they're still pushing it. They're pushing it on the hardware side, and they're pushing it very significantly here on the software side. And again, you mentioned it, but it is significant updates on the software side. It brings it, again, when you look at the way it works now, it feels almost like a desktop, but it's not the dumb down the desktop option, which some have been going with. It's the push up, the multi-touch version of a device. So my point is, it's still a multi-touch first device. And if they keep at it like this, they might finally, 10 years after the introduction of the first device, reach that goal of making it a serious machine. And the fact that they had so many updates with this version of iOS, I didn't expect that. Did you?
No, I didn't. And in fact, let's real quickly, new keyboard covers. There's a leather sleeve coming back with built-in storage for the Apple Pencil. They added some features to Apple Pencil, trying to take some shots at the Surface Pen, mark up anything you can print, searchable handwriting and notes that is kind of nifty. But yeah, the whiz-bang iOS...
I'm interrupting just for a second, but maybe we're not doing a good enough job at explaining. Productivity-wise, it's a ton of tiny little things that will make your workday easier, will make your life easier as you're trying to work. Things like on the keyboard, if you flick one of the keys, it prints, it types the symbol on top of the key, like for a number or something like that. You don't have to switch the keyboard. Or things like when you go to the app switcher, the apps that are in the history are groups of apps. So you would have, the 2 apps that you work usually with that are available, and you can tap on it and it comes back. So you can alternate between groups of apps. All of this is going to make it a lot easier to work. So sorry, I interrupted, but
that's all right along with what I was going to say, which is we had a lot of more features announced for iOS in general for the iPhone, but none of them nearly as compelling as the stuff we were getting with iOS 11. And those were some of the compelling things that you're talking about. I mean, over on the iOS side, they're making the Siri voice more natural. As I mentioned, there's person-to-person payments now in Apple Pay, and they have this Apple Cash card where you can store that money, and you can do whatever you want. You can send it, store it, transfer it. They made a lot about the fact that Siri is now learning on device. So it will learn about you and store it only on the device, but it can sync it to your other devices. Apple never sees that stuff, so a lot of privacy protection. As you mentioned, the CarPlay, do not disturb, social feature. So Ping is back for Apple Music. And I guess probably the two biggest were the App Store redesign and the augmented reality.
Yes. However, before we get to those, I do want to mention the natural sounding Siri was mind-blowing to me.
What?
Mind-blowing. Yes. It was, I mean, we
Okay.
only got 2 sentences, but it felt, maybe I didn't hear right. It felt like a real person speaking.
Okay. I
It
was
felt
not blown away. I was like, oh, I guess that's kind of better.
Well, maybe I didn't hear it right.
No,
Maybe I
that's
should
so- that's
go
so
and
funny. We
listen
had
to
such
it again.
different,
But it
reactions,
felt
yeah.
to me like science fiction. It felt like an actual person speaking. So to me, that's big. The
Okay.
Apple Pay, I also think is pretty big because they're creating their own card, their own cash card, which is effectively making them into a bank. And it bypasses other banks that aren't working with them on Apple Pay, and makes you able to use Apple Pay even if your bank or your Visa card or whatever isn't compatible, which is a big problem in some countries, including France. We only have like 1 or 2 banks that works with Apple Pay. So I'm wondering how big this is going to be in certain regions, and probably not the less developed countries in Africa or these kinds of areas where
the problem
they're
is
Android heavy anyway.
most people
But-
have Android in the world, not just in developed
Exactly.
countries. Yeah.
Yes, but a lot of people that do have Apple products can't use Apple Pay because of the lack of corporations of the banks. So that might be a solution for that. Now, you were talking about the AR stuff, right?
Well, the App Store redesign and the augmented reality.
Oh, right. App Store redesign is long overdue. I think the really interesting aspect of it, beyond the cooler looking stuff, is the fact that it's actually, well, there are 2 things. First, there's a Today tab, which is reminiscent of the Apple Music Today tab.
Now we know why they hired all those journalists, right? Because they're writing these write-ups of the apps.
And that's the thing. There's stuff to go check out on the App Store. There's, news tips, like stuff that might interest you. And then they also separated the games section into its own tab, which makes a huge amount of sense because obviously games are the main category for apps, and it was kind of polluting everyone else's app ranking, and so now it's like 2 completely separate app stores almost. There's a game app store and an apps app store. And then for the AR stuff, I thought it was incredibly impressive, especially when they showed a demo with just an iPad, meaning 1 camera and not 2 with the iPhone 7. And the way it detected the surface was rock solid, like super stable. And they even had like dynamic lighting of a lamp on a table that would light up the physical, like the virtual light would light up the physical table in your screen. However, it's an incredible tech demo. I see no practical use for it.
Well,
Zero.
it's a fishing expedition.
Unless-
they're throwing out AR kit
unless-
and saying, hey, devs, all the devs in the audience, this is what it can do. Got any ideas? Here you go.
I'm not sure that's the only thing they're doing. It might be preparing the terrain for a potential device that is dedicated to AR.
Oh, certainly. No, that's the next step after that. You're absolutely right.
Right.
You throw it out to the devs and see what they can come up with, and then that helps you formalize a strategy to launch a device, which has definitely been rumored that they're working on.
Right, exactly. So I don't think consumers are going to have any use of that technology on their iPhones and iPads beyond the, IKEA put up your couches and furniture in this room and take a picture to see what it would look like.
The last thing before we move off iOS, I do like the airport maps that they have. And I know you can get those from other places, but it looked really well designed. So that might make me try Apple Maps in an airport potentially.
It's getting better. It's not quite at the level of other maps.
And the other thing is, like, if I use Google Maps and then I go to my Chrome browser or I go to my Android device, my Pixel C or my Android phone, all my Google Maps history and favorites, and I can send routes from one to the other. If I use Apple Maps, I have to be using an Apple device. It's the same problem with all of this stuff. All right, macOS High Sierra. faster Safari, new split view for mail, some cool editing tools and views for photos. Big things to me were Apple File System being replaced, or I'm sorry, HFS being replaced by Apple File System, which has native encryption and crash protection, and the external graphics, which we're going to talk to Peter Wells here in a second. Also something that he liked and Roger Chang liked as well, the ability to natively support external graphics processors.
Yeah, I'm not as impressed as some by this, and that might be because I'm looking at it through the prism of gaming. The problem so just to be clear, this is going to be great for pros, for people who have professional use of these things. They made a lot of noise about developing VR and these kind of things on Mac, which is going to be possible now, which is great. But for games, if some people think, well, I'll have the mobile machine I take with me when I go somewhere on a plane, and I come home and I can play with my external graphics card. The problem with the Mac lineup is that there aren't enough devices that have a dedicated discrete graphics card to motivate developers to put their games on the platform, and that is not going to change this. So
this is targeting pros. This goes back to my theme of targeting professionals who are like, I just for my job I need to plug in an external graphics card. Well, now you can.
Yeah, but I mean, they made a lot of noise about Metal 2 and how much faster it is for games and for this and for that. It's still, no, it's not going to change the situation. They need, in order to bring back, game developers, they would need to include way more discrete graphics card in their machines, and they're not doing that to a sufficient extent.
We also spent time. Yeah. Oh, Roger, what do you got to say?
So I was going to say for the pro thing, and especially with Metal, they essentially combined what was OpenGL, but also OpenCL, which is compute language, which is basically doing general processing on the GPU. So not maybe graphics specific, but probably something that is high floating point computation intensive. And so you can kind of shunt that off to, say, like an external GPU that can crunch it. And I think they're using games because that's what people can most easily visualize and say, ooh, ah, and they get it, versus like, hey, you can do like double level precision when you're in your CAD program, and you don't have to worry about real time rendering, or you don't have to worry about rendering because it happens all real time because you have this super fast GPU connected to your laptop, which previously, if you wanted something like that, you needed to buy a very big, very heavy, and very loud PC laptop to do. So I mean, it's cool, and also the side benefit is, for Intel, is that this just reinforces and legitimizes Thunderbolt as the go-to port for basically offloading high bandwidth devices, because it's essentially just a PCI Express a bus on the side of your computer instead of inside it where you have to open it up. But that's just my 2 cents.
Good. I'd say that's at least 3 cents. That's good stuff. I'm going to skip through the new iMacs. There's some spec upgrades, but it's mostly the fact that they put Kaby Lake into the iMacs. Same with the MacBooks. These are all shipping today. It's the kind of thing you used to see just pushed out the same day as the announcement, but not mentioned. But the fact that they're giving the MacBook Air a speed bump, and everybody's like, the MacBook Air isn't dead. Well, that's kind of cool. And there was a price cut on the 13-inch MacBook Pro without the touch bar. That went down to $12.99. But the star of the show, I think, was the iMac Pro, 27-inch space gray 5K display, coming in December for $5,000. Ships with an 8-core Xeon processor, but you can get it configured up to 18 cores. Radeon Vega graphics available with up to 16 gigabytes of VRAM, 400 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. If you know what this means, it's impressive. 22 teraflops of half-precision computing. That's big for machine learning, if you're into that sort of thing. Again, machine learning professionals. And really, that's entirely what this was targeted at, was, no, we don't have a new Mac Pro. Instead, we have an iMac Pro. It's a Mac Pro with a screen built in.
Basically, the only difference is that it's not upgradable, although, their trash
was
can
the
Mac
Pro,
wasn't
yeah.
really, yeah, exactly. So it's coming out of left field, but I'm sort of wondering if pros, it seems to me with what I know about all of this and computer stuff, this is an absolutely viable workstation machine, and it has the the handy form factor, which it's just an all-in-one, and it's an incredibly powerful machine. I could absolutely see companies that need that kind of computing power just figure, you know what, screw it. We're just going to buy 10 of them, put them in our, in our open space thing for people to do their computing, and we're going to be fine. They don't need to go with a, Mac Pro or any other of those things. It seems like it answers those questions, which is unexpected for an iMac to do that.
Yeah, it's weird to me, and I know it can drive external monitors, but just as a form factor, it's weird to have that monitor that's built into it, that it's an all-in-one that's doing this. But if you get past that, or if that doesn't matter to you, 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 10 gigabit Ethernet built in, starting at 8-core Xeon processor, like it is an incredibly powerful machine.
Look at the specs. That's what matters for these kinds of questions. That's what matters, and it has the specs. So it kind of is like it is true to its name. It's an iMac, but it's a pro machine. Yeah. Like who that doesn't need that kind of computing power would buy this? No one. You specifically buy this because you want a lot of computing power. So yeah, it's a very capable pro machine.
And then the big thing with WatchOS 4, and they had a lot of announcements around WatchOS, but you can scroll vertically through a new dock of both recent apps and Siri cards. So Siri will figure out what you need to know and put it on your watch so that, when you're in the airport, your boarding pass shows up, but it'll also tell you if you need to make a phone call within a half hour, all that kind of stuff. New watch faces.
Google cards.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the watch faces of Woody, Jesse, and Buzz from Toy Story, those are nifty. The kaleidoscope one was trippy. Probably the thing that impressed me the most was the NFC connection with 85% of the gym equipment that's coming out starting this fall. Now, granted, you're going to go in a lot of gyms, especially in hotels, and it's not going to work because it's older equipment. But the newer equipment, as it gets replaced, it's kind of cool that you can just have a watch on, pair it with your gym equipment, and then the heart rate gets sent to the equipment. You don't have to wear that funky band, and all of the data being collected by the equipment gets sent to your watch for the activity monitor.
Yeah, it seemed like, first of all, NFC, they're also going to enable NFC reader in the iPhone, which is also quite big. But all the Android users are looking at us going like, but yeah, this, it seems like they didn't create a new explosive growth category with the Apple Watch, but they made a solid space for themselves in that category. And it seems like they're, again, kind of pushing it slowly but surely. And for this specifically, Apple has enough oomph that it might become the de facto device that people are going to use when they go to the gym and care about all of these things. It's just, it becomes a kind of a standard for this.
Mary Meeker's report last week emphasized that wearables and the health market are really the two big things. And so what Apple's doing here is one pillar of that health market is fitness. They're emphasizing that because they already have it. But I would expect HealthKit to be integrated more and more into the watch as well. You didn't hear him talking about a lot of things outside of health and fitness here. And surprisingly not enough about health this time around. I expect them to say more about that in the future. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, the only tvOS announcement was Amazon's video app coming to the tvOS, but they did say we will have more about Apple TV later this year. So, come on, it's got to be at least a 4K, TV, if not an ultra high def version, right?
What's the difference between 4K and ultra high def?
Well, you get the high dynamic range.
The HDR. Yeah, of course. It's going to be 4K HDR. Yes, for sure.
Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com, especially helpful on days like today where we know the bulk of the stuff's going to be Apple, but we want to find out those other stories to put in there as well. So we appreciate that. Got a chance right before the show to chat with Peter Wells, who's actually at the WWDC. Here's what we said. So thankfully, through the magic of time travel, Peter Wells is joining us from the actual Apple event. How you doing, Peter?
I'm not too bad, Tom. I'm a little bit tired. It was, a 17-hour discussion just then. But yeah, no, I'm feeling okay. What about you?
Yeah, this discussion was longer than your flight from Australia, I have a feeling. Patrick Beja and I have just gone through most, not all, of the details that they just announced. And I know you got a chance to put your hands on some of these devices. What have you gotten to see?
Yeah, so they've got everything on display. So I've played around with the new iPad. I think the iPad for me was the 10.5-inch iPad was the highlight of what I've played with. Yeah, I mean, everything else, it's hard to tell that you're looking at new products. I mean, the new MacBooks are pretty much the last year's MacBook with the new Kaby Lake processor.
Yeah, you can't see inside and see the processor.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed. So they did actually show a couple of a new software that is supporting the touch bar. So, all those people who assumed the touch bar was a bit of an idea that might have passed its time. Look, some people are still developing. I saw Photoshop using the touch bar just a moment ago, so that was fun. But yeah, for me, I really did think the iPad, the 10.5-inch iPad was the nicest of the devices, and certainly the one I want to definitely get my hands on first.
So what about the HomePod? Did you get a chance to look at that?
It was right at the back of the room. It had a gigantic scrum around it. It was very hard to get your hands on, and it wasn't playing music. So they spent, a good 3 hours talking about how it was the most beautiful sounding speaker you'll ever own, which I believe I've heard that from them before. But anyway,
the old hi-fi,
that's what they
right?
said. Yeah. So they said all of that, and then they weren't actually playing any music on the speaker in the demo area. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out a little bit more about that one back in December when it finally ships.
Not quite ready for playtime. That's very interesting to know. So no demo on that. Just a chance to look at it. It looks like a squat little Mac Pro with a grill.
It really does, yeah. It looks like they're recycling some of their older Mac Pros, that maybe the ones that had the graphics card issue. But yeah, a bit of a bummer. I did like some of the other things. I'm sure you guys have already talked about the Do Not Disturb while driving, but I've got to say, as an old man, I really love that feature. I'm so glad to see that. That was one of the highlights of software. There was not a lot of software highlights that I saw today.
Now, one of the things that The Verge noted in their live blog is that people were very excited about the iMac Pro when it was announced. Not terribly excited about the iPad Pro when it was announced. Is that the mood you felt?
Not really. I mean, I was sitting, at least my Twitter stream was all about the iPad. We were joking today that the iPad was the winner. I saw one person say the iPad became the president today. But yeah, it seemed to be that was the thing that caught most people's attention that I saw. It was interesting, actually, in the demo area to see just how heavily they were going with VR and AR. So those demos that they showed on stage, they've got whole sections of the hands-on area devoted to the VR and AR. I do think the AR is a hell of a lot cooler to play with. VR is still a little bit wonky for me. I feel, I still don't want to wear one of those giant Oculus headsets. But look, it was still great to see Oculus plugged into an iMac, which is something I have not seen before in my life.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking time. I know it's super hectic out there, and really appreciate you talking to us.
Always love chatting to you, Tom.
All right, cheers. Yeah, thanks again to Peter Wells for doing that. And Patrick, to your point about virtual reality and augmented reality, they didn't have a lot yet, but they certainly spending a lot of time trying to convince the press that they're a VR and AR company by showing it plugged into Macs.
I think what they're doing is showing people that they can develop for VR and that this is a viable platform for pros to be used to just make that development, because they understand it's very important at the moment and they don't want to seem like they're left behind. I don't think, anytime soon we're going to see headsets being plugged by consumers for actual use.
I'll tell you what, though, as we wrap up here, my final thoughts are it did feel a little bit like someone explaining too much at the end of the day. No single announcement struck me as odd but the fact that they felt they had to go 2.5 hours and talk about a lot of hardware at what is usually a very exclusively software-focused event. And, the past few years, it's been, hey, it's a developers event, so we're going to talk about the operating systems for the developers. It felt like, and because it's developers, probably this is why, they really needed to convince you that we have not forgotten the pros, we have not forgotten about, we are on the cutting edge of machine learning. And yes, we just saw Microsoft and Google do their big announcements, and Facebook as well at F8. Here's what we've got going on. We're still in this race. And that's kind of an unusual feeling from Apple, which usually doesn't feel like they have to explain themselves to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I understand this is the sentiment that a lot of people have expressed. I think they just have expanded their product line so much that they have to talk about a lot of things, and they don't have 15 events every year. So you have to put them somewhere. We all know that the main one is in the fall when they present their new iPhones. They might have another one in the beginning of the year, and they use that for the new MacBook Pros, which a lot of people were eagerly anticipating. They're not going to start making, 6 events a year. So I do think it makes sense to talk about all of this at this point.
All right. Well, that is it. A little longer today because we had so much to go through. But Patrick Beja, thanks so much for doing this with me today.
Thank you for having me. I always love talking about these kinds of things. And, it provides me with an opportunity to let go of the built-up tension during those 15-hour keynotes that we all watch.
If you're into the bot takes from Veronica Belmont, she'll be on tomorrow. They were doing an office move, so it actually worked out where it was better for her to be on tomorrow and Patrick to be on today. But thank you, Patrick. Where can folks find out more about what you're doing?
Not Patrick on Twitter and on Facebook as well. And if you enjoy gaming, remember there is a huge gaming week next week with E3, and we're going to be covering all of it on Pixels, which you can find on my site, FrenchSpin.com, or just on your podcast app. Just look for Pixels. It's a gaming show, which I'm sure you'll enjoy.
Thanks to everyone who gives a little bit of value back to the show for the value they get from the show. That's why we are here wading through all these announcements, so that's what you pay us for. That's why we're doing it. So we really, really appreciate it. Patreon.com/DTNS. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. We're at facebook.com/dailytechnewsshow, and our website, of course, is dailytechnewsshow.com. Back tomorrow with Veronica Belmont. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Woo! We did it.
We did it.
It's going to be a long upload. Took 2.5 hours worth of announcements. I joked that it was a 2-page press release. I think that was a 4 or 5-page press release today.
It was, there were on Apple's, press site and Tech Meme, a number of them. A large number of them.
Yeah.
Showbot.
.tv.
iOS goes to 11.
Oh,
Spinal Tap reference.
That was actually spoken by Tim. Well, I don't know. It may not have been Tim Cook. Someone said iOS goes to 11. I think it was Tim Cook.
It's a Spinal Tap reference.
Yes, he was making that reference on stage.
WWDC breaks all the records at the box office. Is that a macOS and iOS? Tom's gut says. Savings in iPhone. Supreme Court of Physics upholds Moore's law. That's not real. That's kind of misleading.
I kind of like HomePod. It's an iPod for your home.
Plus, it also does all those other things.
Yeah.
Stop now, HomePod time.
I think it should be stop. HomePod time.
Oh, Padawan, your maturity is almost complete.
Oh, that is
Star
clever.
Wars reference. The iPad gets Siri Us. iGringotts.
WWDC breaks all of the records at the box office, confusing
Yeah,
the
I saw
Wonder
that
Woman.
one.
That's funny.
Will this company be more lucky this time?
Oh, it's Palmer Luckey. Yeah. Have to say, we're that as good as that is, we are definitely not using a headline that does not relate to WWDC, since that is by far the bulk of the show.
All right. HomePod. It's an iPod for your home.
That's your favorite?
Trying to
It's
find
cool.
one that
Savings in iPhones. Because
Apple. We heard you like to give us money, so we turned your money into Apple money.
It's too long, but
it's too long, but it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Foxconn says you all ain't from around these parts.
No, Japan
I can't-
says that to Foxconn.
I really want to know if they applied for bank licenses in different countries.
I would imagine that the abilities that allow them to do Apple Pay, where they operate virtual credit cards, are what allows them to do Apple Cash. But that is a good question. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, because I think it's kind of an under the radar thing, which is pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, there's a different level of what you can do as a PayPal Square type thing versus being an actual bank. I know there's
But
different.
maybe they don't need to do all the other things. Maybe they just need the PayPal Square thing. Because PayPal can do a lot of things.
Because they're holding it in transit, so to speak.
Are they?
The cash, yeah. Though that's what PayPal does.
Okay. But you
iOS
can
goes
pay
to
for
11.
everything with PayPal. What's the difference between in transit?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I know that
guess-
PayPal has different regulations applying to it than like Bank of America or Citibank or something.
Because they're not, well, with a credit card, well, I don't know.
I mean, and it's confusing because PayPal has since started to issue credit cards and stuff. So I think they now fall under it. But when the original PayPal system was around.
Right.
iOS goes to 11? No.
It's not even iOS that was the impressive thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good iOS title, but I would like a more inclusive title.
WWDC goes to 11?
That doesn't make any sense.
All the announcements. WWDC : all the announcements.
HomePod. It's an iPod for your home.
Maybe
Yeah, but that's
the one.
not any more inclusive than saying iOS goes to 11.
No, but
HomePod is more important than iOS.
I have an
11.
unspoken train of thought since I said that, which was like, yeah, but trying to be inclusive is going to be boring. And the most important announcement was probably the HomePod.
Oh, it's an iPod for your home. I'm curious to know what the frequency response on that speaker is.
Yeah, I'm going to bet that there are going to be a lot of people who know what they're talking about critiquing the HomePod's actual fidelity.
I mean,
actual
it's
quality.
the way it's designed makes sense, but you're not going to get a very...
I speak from ignorance when I say this, but I got a very Bose feeling from their demonstration.
Yeah, Bose is really good at making sure the mids are emphasized, and so people kind of feel very impressed. But that's not what you want when in a high fidelity with a speaker with a high dynamic range.
And all that beam forming and like acoustic sampling.
See, that technology's been around forever. It was first used with surround sound receivers, right? When you had surround sound speakers, and instead of you trying to just match it with your ear, you would have a little microphone. You put it where you would sit, and then you connect it to the receiver. It would figure out how to adjust the various levels for each speaker.
How about Apple's still a pro?
Yeah.
It's not
Is
as
it?
funny
I
as
mean,
HomePod. It's an iPod for your home.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of. It feels like something that Apple was really emphasizing, so I wouldn't feel. It wouldn't feel inappropriate to talk about Apple being pros still, but.
Well, really, they're in the business of making money. They'll be whatever they need to be.
No, but there are all of those questions about Apple being.
Oh,
I mean, they had that whole
pro
sit down
market.
where they're like, "Hey, journalists, we still care."
Yeah.
So it's definitely part of that.
We care about money. Why don't they just?
Shane has a good idea. We should see if we can get Robert on once the HomePod's
Yeah, I
out.
know. I've been trying to reach out to him, and he's responded, but he hasn't responded to my follow-up questions. It's like, yeah, and then okay, cool. How does this work? I'll ping him again this week. He might be busy. I don't know. Or he might be avoiding.
No, Shane was saying when the HomePod comes out, which isn't going to be till December. We can have him on before.
Well, we should get an audio guy on, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Beamforming is very curious, but yeah, it's gonna be. It's just an odd placement for the subwoofer. But I think they do that because they want to bounce off and up into your ear.
Yeah, because the subwoofer's on top. Is that right?
Yeah, which is usually the reverse of what you normally want to do.
It's sub, woof, bass, low, down. It's all supposed to be on the ground. Right?
I bet you it doesn't go below 60 hertz. Maybe 50. You could try pushing 50, but I doubt it.
I mean, all of that said, it's still going to be better than the Amazon Echo. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, but doesn't the
That's
Amazon
all
Echo
it has to
have
be.
doesn't the Amazon Echo have like well, I guess that means you would have to buy like an 1/8 inch stereo plug.
Yeah, no, the Echo Dot, right? You plug it into whatever speaker you want. That's Amazon's answer. It's like, don't like the Echo speaker? Then buy the Dot. Put it in whatever speaker you feel like.
I want to put my surround sounds back up, but I have a kid that's going to knock him over and then to collapse on her head.
Yeah, you don't want that.
That's probably not good.
Yeah. I don't know if I want a HomePod is the thing. And it's system lock-in for me. I have an Amazon Echo. And as bad as that speaker is, it's the speaker that's in my house already. Do I want to spend $349 not only to get a different speaker because it's better, but also to have a different assistant and a different ecosystem that, all the stuff I set up on the Echo isn't going to work on. That's the problem with smart speakers for me right now.
I will only buy a smart speaker when it comes attached to a moving robot chassis.
Well, that's just an entirely different product then.
Exactly. It needs to follow
Basically,
me around.
you're just saying you don't want a smart speaker.
I want an R2-D2 is what I want, Tom.
Yeah, you want an entirely different thing instead of a smart speaker.
I want a robot that can look my kid in the eye. It's one red eye into her two human eyes.
Stare her down.
The dome pops off and serves you snacks, or like a cold beverage. Yeah, see, that would be a totally killer product.
It's very Jabba the Hutt of you.
Oh wait, that was the Cantina. HomePod.
That's the problem with the sail barge, is it did not have a catchy song.
Yeah. Also, it was sailing over the sands. Who takes a trip over sand dunes?
You don't want to walk
no
through them.
offense. Huh? You don't want to be in them, period.
Yeah, that's why you sail over them.
No, it just seemed like something you would do as a leisure activity. I don't know.
Look, if you got to get out to the Sarlacc pit, it's probably the best way.
So is the Sarlacc pit essentially just the ass end of Tatooine? Ba-bum-bum. Get it?
I think I get it. I was about to say, but it's a sphere. There is no end.
There's no point. It's a ball. But do you make ball points?
Oh, we're tired. We're so tired.
I am impressed.
You're impressed?
By our.
He was impressed into service. Impressment. They don't do that anymore, do they? Impressment.
I still want to hear what Patrick was impressed by.
The joke.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, geez. It's such a
Yes,
ringing
exactly.
endorsement there, Tom. Oh.
It's not what I was expecting. That's all. Biocast saying, cut the stream. Cut the stream. We are going to cut the stream, actually. You guys have anything? It's going to take a while for this to export and upload. So, and I know it's getting late for you, Patrick. Any last thoughts? Wonder Woman, HomePod.
I wish I had found a valid acronym for WWDC, which started with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman doesn't care. Wonder Woman destroys. I don't know.
Wonder Woman digs computers.
But she doesn't.
She did in the in her third season with Linda Carter. She dealt with a supercomputer named Ira.
Wonder Woman develops
Currencies.
currency. It's her new payment app.
Wonder Woman.
See, everyone knows that song. Almost everyone knows that song.
I played that song and then the new theme back to back on when we were driving over to the theater last week. It was interesting to hear them back to back. There's some similarity somehow, even though they're very different. They both feel like Wonder Woman somehow.
How do they make you feel?
You're not helping, Leon. Why is that? Turtle is on its back. But you're not helping, Roger. Why is that?
Because I wanted cooked turtle. It's probably the fastest way to cook it. You know,
See, I always knew Roger was a replicant.
why wouldn't you? Well, technically, it's a tortoise, right? It's like a turtle. It's like a turtle.
What's a turtle?
What's the difference between a turtle
and it's
and
like a turtle.
what's the difference?
Everything you're
between a
saying is
turtle
failing
and
the
a
void
tortoise?
comp test. That's all I know.
So a turtle is semi-aquatic. A tortoise is land-based. Oh, no. A terrapin is semi-aquatic. A true turtle is like a sea turtle. Is a true turtle. And then terrapins are what you like box turtles and stuff. And then a tortoise is like a Galapagos or kind of desert dwelling animal.
Okay.
All delicious with the right herbs, the right cooking methods. Delicious.
I'm so tired.
Maybe I should invest in a sea turtle farm ranch.
Sorry, I was watching the mailman try to shove all of the advertisements into my mailbox. I'm like, just leave it on the ground, dude. It's fine.
You know those flyers, junk mailers, and Sunday samplers? Those are what keep the United States Post Office in business.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what? I'm actually pretty impressed overall. Since I've moved down here and I have a place for them to dump packages without carrying too much, they do a pretty good job.
Well, it depends on where you live.
Yeah, my last one kept giving me someone else's mail.
The carriers here seem to vary regularly. Like we don't have the same one for very long. Like we must be the training route or something. And I can tell when we've got a professional because all the mail goes to the right people instead of my neighbor's mail being mixed with mine and vice versa.
I've had that happen to me once. But I can always tell it's a regular mailman because he's always talking on the phone. Like he's always.
Oh yeah, this guy is too.
It's like, honestly, I think they're just calling each other. They're just talking like, "Yeah, how's it going on the other side of the city? You almost done? Let's go get tacos at whatever."
Oh man, tacos sound good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go get tacos. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed the coverage. Let us know what you think, and we'll be back tomorrow. Au revoir.
Bye.